Okay, now what I want to talk about is the fact that here you'll notice we've got 3 sets of statements that are exactly the same. So I'm sure what you're thinking to yourself is, hey, I could use a loop there. All right, maybe you weren't thinking that. If I want this to occur 3 times, I could put it inside of a for loop. Right? And it should do the same thing. I'm just going to take my comment out there. So let me run this now. And I'm going to put friends.txt. And it does, it works fine. And this is good, but a lot of times you don't know how many things are going to be in the input file. If you did, a for loop is perfect because it's a good loop to choose if you know how many items you have available to you. But most of the times in a file we don't. We just have a list of information. So a for loop is not really the best way to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about detecting the end of file marker. When you have an input file, you can see the cursor flashing right here after Sue. When you save this file, it places what's called the end of file marker, EOF, out there, and you can't see it, but it's there. And so we can write some code that'll detect that we've reached the end of file. So first you need to be aware of, you don't want to have any extra things out here at the end of your file. You don't want to have any blank spaces or blank lines. So you just want your cursor at the end of the file. You could hit delete a few times, to make sure that you don't. I'm just going to save it. And what I'm going to use instead of a for loop is a while loop. And it's going to look like this. And this while loop, what it's going to do is it's going to read a name from the input file, and as long as there's more data out there and it hasn't reached the end of the input file, this will return a true. It'll output the name, then it'll read the next name in. And if it still hasn't read in the end of file marker, it'll be true and it'll output the next name. And this will read in the third name in my input file. So I still didn't read in the end of file marker, and then it'll output that name. And then when I read in the end of file marker, this is actually going to return a false, this input statement. And when it returns a false, the while loop will end. So I'm going to run the program again. It should do the same thing. And there we go. So if I was to go in my input file and I was to add a few more names, and save this again, and go back and run this, you can see it'll display all the names. So it's much more flexible now because it's checking for the end of file marker. So it might look a little weird because this doesn't look to us to be a Boolean or relational expression, but the input operator like that, when you use it with a file, will return true if it does not read the end of file marker. It'll return false if it does.